All right, good morning, everybody. Thank you all so much for being here with us today. My name is Lydia Stinson. I am an interpreter for California State Park's Colorado Desert District here today at Anza-Borrego Desert State Park. And I am excited to be here today honoring César Chávez Day and his work here in Borrego Springs and his influence on our local Borrego Springs community. So with us today for this panel discussion, we have Bill Chandler and Marcos Munoz, who were both organizers and boycott coordinators here during those historic events of 1966, as well as Reverend Chris Hartmeyer, director of the National Farm Workers Ministry and pastor of the Presbyterian Church. Unfortunately, our fourth panelist today, Gilbert Padilla, is not able to be with us today, but he does send his regards to all of the other panelists and thanks them for sharing their stories today. And thanks everybody watching on Facebook with us. And of course, we all thank everybody for being on Facebook with us today. We're so excited to hear from our panelists. And without further ado, I'm actually going to introduce first our local high school student, Moses, who helped create the interpretive panels that we just unveiled. He's going to kick us off with the first question for our panelists. So I'm going to invite Moses to ask our first question here.
Am I muted?
Go ahead, Moses.
My first question for your panelists are, what were your roles in Cesar Chavez's movement in Borrego Springs during 1966? What roles did you play?
Well, we were in Borrego Springs in early May of 1966 to help workers at the Jojo Ranch there in Borrego Springs, a 6,000-acre ranch of grapes, to help them organize. And this was part of an effort that began in Delano in 1965 with the strike in the grapes that encompassed most of the growers in that area, though, there, including DeGiorgio, who had land here and in other parts of California, including Lamont, Narvin, and of course, Delano and Marysville in Northern California. And we started on this ranch here because the harvest season of the grapes began early, and afterwards it progressed up California into Delano and other places. But we were here to work with the workers to get them involved in the work that we were doing throughout DeGiorgio in early 1966, with the idea of trying to get a union representation certification. And Marcos was here probably before I was, and was instrumental in signing up the workers into the union.
Go ahead.
Yep.
Yes, go ahead.
Borrego.
You just speak, just talk.
Buenas tardes.
Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Marcos Munoz. I was involved with the Borrego Springs organizing. I was sent out from Sierra Vista in Delano to come to Borrego Springs to organize the workers that were bringing in. At that time, a man named Manuel, he was the general foreman for DeGiorgio, and we organized in Sierra Vista, and so then they pulled these workers, 2 buses of workers, to come to Borrego Springs to do the harvest. And I was sent with them to come as what you call in Tupiro,
Submarine.
You know, you go work together with the workers and to organize the workers inside of the camp and having them sign
Authorization cards.
saying we authorized by when we represented by the United Farm Workers. When we got to Borrego Springs, the general foreman, Manuel, passed the list of all the people that was going to come on and work there, and which quadrillas they're going to go to, which crews they're going to go to. And when it got to me, or the other people inside was together with me, they recognized me that I was not the farm worker that we were bringing in there, you know. I was a farm worker, but I was from Delano
The union.
and the Giorgio Ranch. And so I was organizing for the union. So they kicked me out. There was no room for me there. And see, now I was not going to go out. They was going to send me to jail. So I went out. When I went out, it was very hard for me because I never been in Borrego Springs. I never heard of Borrego Springs. But my mission was to sign the workers into the membership card, you know. I hope you understand me what I'm saying. I have a little problem talking, you know. But so since I didn't have no house there, and I didn't have no money, so I found a road into a little hill like this, and it was a state park. And all it was there, a table, a cement table, and a little thing where you start a fire, you know, and
Grill.
have a cookout or whatever you want to. So I spent some time there, and in the nighttime, I used to sneak into the camp. And when I was into the camp, I talked to 4 or 5 people there together so that nobody hears. And we get some cards signed up and some didn't, you know. But we becoming to be noticed there, you know. And the man told him, Senor Manuel, told the workers, I said, you finally talking to the union or me, it would get fired. So then they didn't want to really talk to me because they didn't want to get fired. So then I went into the camp, into the ranch, in the fields where they had the irrigation. And they had a man there open a valve to get the water out to irrigate that part of the vines, that part of the fields. And I sneak in there at night, and I grabbed the, what do you call it, the rod?
The rod, yeah.
And so they won't hit me. And once I grabbed the rod, then when they got all scared, they didn't know where it was, or what was happening, you know. So I told them, I said, don't worry about it. No le voy a pegar. Le vengo a hablar de la unión.
Go ahead.
Don't worry about it. I'm talking to you about the union. And so I convinced him to sign the card. And I went to another field where it's another irrigator, and does the same thing. I went on like this, organizing in the nights, you know. Sometimes when I don't have no more money, I used to sneak into the camp, and some of the workers gave me some food to eat from them, you know, that they had. And That's how I kind of survived, you know. But it was very, very hard. At one point, the police come to the
State Park.
uh, state park, and he wanted to move me out of there. He didn't want me to be there. But then somehow they come to the conclusion that there was a city police and the park is a state police. So did he have the same,
Jurisdiction.
what do you call them, search?
Jurisdiction.
Jurisdiction? And so they left me alone.
Okay, that's enough.
When I had all the cards signed that I thought that I had the majority of the people sign, you know, then is when César come and
Chris Hartmeyer
Grace Hartmeyer
and Victor Saldini.
and
Saldini.
so
For the election.
somehow, I don't know who was the one that agreed to have the elections in the Georgia, which was the first election that the farm workers participate, you know. And at that time, when César was there, the workers knew de César Chávez, el señor César Chávez, aquí anda, aquí está. And then they arrest César Chávez, myself,
Chris Hartmeyer.
and Chris Hartmeyer, and that's another person.
Victor Saldini.
Eh?
Victor Saldini, the priest.
El padre, no me acuerdo el apelativo de they arrest us for trespassing, supposed. And they put us in a paddy wagon and he asked us to take off our clothes. And so we went with no clothes inside of the paddy wagon. And he took us to some place.
San Diego.
Beyond Borrego, I mean, it was like a
Courthouse.
Palm Prince or something like that. Not San Diego or something like that. I don't remember the town exactly. And they took us over there. And at that time, I remember that Mr. Gilberto Padilla, one of the officials of the union, come in and got us out, paid the bill, take us out.
Let somebody else talk.
And when we went up there, the workers, it was all excited. I mean, they was concerned by the arrest del señor César Chávez. Marcos don't mean anything, but César Chávez means something. And then the company noticed that there was a lot of action with the workers. Then at that time, that señor went to Calexico and brought some women to convince the workers to vote against the union. And when that happened, you know, we assumed that we lost because the woman was more attractive than the union then, you know. But the reality came out, which was a kind of surprise. We win the election. we won the elections, and the company was more surprised because the workers went in favor of the union.
Okay,
You know.
let other people talk.
So that's my little story in terms of Borrego Springs.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Marcos, for sharing that with us. And we'd love to hear more from you. But I also want to make sure we introduce Reverend Chris Hartmeyer, who you were just referencing, was one of the men that was arrested with César Chávez. So Reverend Chris Hartmeyer, do you think you could speak a little bit about your role here in Borrego Springs as well? I'm going to ask that you unmute yourself before you begin talking. We'll need you to unmute first. We can't hear you yet. If you could have some maybe help unmuting so we can hear you. Yeah, we cannot hear you. There we go.
You were in Borrego Springs that day when we were all arrested?
Can you repeat that?
Marcos, were you there in Borrego Springs on the day that Cesar and the rest of us got arrested?
Yes.
Yes,
And were you were one of the workers that got arrested that day?
Yes.
yes.
Was that a yes?
What is it?
Yes. Say yes.
Yes. Sí.
I can't hear.
He said yes.
He said what?
Yes.
Yes. Well, what happened was that, as far as I can remember, the workers were on strike against Dorigo,
To George.
and Dorigo had land, in the Coachella Valley, including Borrego Springs. And when the workers went on strike there, they were kept inside their living quarters, and Cesar went down to escort them back into the quarters to get their belongings, to get their clothes, and whatever else they had left when they walked out of the fields. And he asked me to go with him, and I did. And Father Victor Salandini from San Diego came and joined him. And basically we were just going to accompany the workers as they were going to go pick up their belongings. But after we went a little ways onto the property, we were told that we were trespassing and that we should leave. And I don't remember the exact conversation that took place, but we were basically told we were trespassing. And so the workers who were already there, and Cesar and Father Victor and myself, who were supposedly accompanying them to get their belongings, were told when we were going into the property, that we were trespassing and we had to leave. So we made the decision to stay and help the workers see if they could get their property. And the next thing I knew, the sheriff came and arrested us all. And basically, it was a very strange event because they put us in chains and all of us, and in the backs of their sheriff's vehicles, and took us to a substation. I don't remember which one, and booked us, and anyway, treated us like raw criminals. They were especially angry at Cesar and Father Victor and myself because we were like outside agitators, and we were the first ones to be put in chains, and the workers were all put in chains, and it was a simple event, but it got really complicated. And the trial that came later, and I wish I could remember in what town it took place. Do you all have any idea? The state parks people, where the trial took place? Marcos, do you remember?
San Diego.
San Diego.
What town the trial
Oh my
took
God.
place? I don't remember at all, but anyway,
Tell them.
we were like, we
And-
were put on trial
Okay.
as if we were like invaders from a foreign land. The workers were treated like dirt as usual, like workers. And Father Victor and Cesar and I were treated like subversive communists, like the first wave of communism coming to San Diego County. And remember, this time was like John Birch Society, and anyway, lots of negative, paranoid feelings about Russia and China and communism, and we were presumably, in their minds, we were the agents of this communist plot, and that's why we were there as subversives. And that it wasn't to really support workers, it was really to start the first wave of communism in San Diego County. And eventually, after several days of this very strange trial, which anybody who had attended it would think, good grief, what country are we in? I mean, these people are just charged with trespassing to help farm workers. And now all of a sudden they're subversive agents from a foreign land. Bill, I can see you with your hand in front of your face. Where are you?
Where am I?
Yeah, where are you?
I'm in Jackson, Mississippi, and we have an organization called the Mississippi Immigrant Rights Alliance, and we've had this for 20 years, and I am the executive director. We have staff, we have volunteers, and so on. But I wanted to get back to some things that need to be filled in. First of all, when we first started the union and the strike started in Delano and so on, we had no money. And when workers came out, it was about 4,000 in Delano that came out. And when we started the effort into Georgia, I remember we didn't have cars that worked very well. And so we borrowed a station wagon from the Los Angeles County Federation of Labor. And we had no money for gas, so we borrowed your credit card, Chris, and used it for gasoline in the
California Migrant Ministry credit card.
Yeah, that's what it was. But you're the one that offered it to us to help with the organizing. And so that whole process took about 2 months, from the first part of May through almost into July, when the strike started. Actually, the strike started in Borrego towards the end of June. The season ended the first part of July. And, of course, we moved north, where the harvest was beginning in the San Joaquin Valley. But one of the significant things is Marcos alluded to the fact that we were staying in the state park. And actually we got kicked out of the city of Borrego by the county sheriff, the San Diego County Sheriff. So Gilbert went up at Marco's suggestion to talk to the park superintendent to see if we could stay up there. And he welcomed us and said we could stay there for free. And then when the strike began, we had the strikers up at the park as well. And it was quite a bit of help that we had from various people to make the strike successful. And it triggered the effort to sign cars and organize in Sierra Vista, which was the ranch in Delano, and also in Arvin and Lamont. Later, we went to their far northern California property, which was deciduous fruit, pears and peaches, where as a teenager, I worked that area in apples and peaches and pears. That was in the 50s. It was a successful campaign. We had the election, and as Marco said, it led to a union contract, one of the first, or actually the second one that was signed in California with farm workers. It had never been done before. And Chris played a continuing role from even long before the strike in Delano started all the way through. I don't remember when you retired, but I left in 1975 to do other work, which led me to Mississippi about 30 years ago to organize workers here. But it was really a very important campaign that was really not that much written about in various books that have been written about the farm workers movement. So we're very appreciative of the Parks Department and of course the César Chávez Foundation for organizing this event and including those of us who were participating in the organizing there in Borrego.
Thank you, Bill, for those words. Of course, we're honored to be able to share all of your stories today. And you've all said some incredible things about your experiences here in Borrego Springs. And I'm wondering if any of you have something to say about, what was significant about Borrego Springs and the events that occurred here. Was there anything significant that that occurred that helped this timeline and this movement?
Well, one of the things for me coming to Borrego Springs, I had never been there before. Although as a teenager, we used to race cars in the desert, in the northern part of the desert, and I was vaguely familiar with what Borrego Springs was even before I started working with the farm workers. So to me, it was very interesting, that whole area there, as well as the support that we had from the workers and their desire to organize and speak for their rights.
To me, Borrego Springs, it was a town that I'd never been, but they were not too different from a town in Delano, California. In this way of sense, we see that the policeman, they was not trying to be neutral. Somehow it was endorsed as the glory, the Tichocho, And so for there, I felt that it was no different than when it was in Delano when we started the strike, But the other, it was to me, it was something that I never know that today we would be talking about Delano. I mean, Borrego Springs. Today, I live in California. I mean,
Chicago.
in Chicago. And I'm married. I have a daughter. And I'm going to be 80 years old in April 25th. That's my birthday. So to me, the most important thing out of this particular discussion in my own mind is when somebody told me that there was going to be a student asking the questions. So into my mind is that something that the students trying to identify with Borrego Springs and the future of Borrego Springs and learn about the early years in Borrego Springs. There was a lot of differences. But to me, in my own mind, is that whatever I did, I'm the person that not educated. But I know how to pick grapes. I know how to work in the fields, you know. And I know that someday this will benefit a younger generation. So to me, talking to a young student there means something good. Something good that we did, you know. And after that, I start my life in going to the boycott. I was in San Francisco, New York. I was in Chicago.
Boston.
I was in Boston, Massachusetts. I was all over New England doing the boycott. I learned English most. I was invited to go to a university called himself Harvard University. This is a very educated people. And to me, my mind it was blown because I couldn't read. What can I gonna tell the people? But our story was very clear. We were sent to Boston or New York and other cities is to talk to people about the conditions of the farm workers. Conditions that we didn't have no toilets in the fields. And that's including Borrego Springs also, you know. You didn't have no medical attention, you know. And this is the kinds of things that people want to gain. Money is important. But remember those times we was talking about 85 cents up to 90 cents. That's the salary of the workers. And some piecework, you know. So we want to have that improved. This is what it brought César Chávez. And this is what César Chávez taught us at that particular time. People that we didn't have no hope. We knew that we was exploited, but we didn't know what to do. We knew that we were not covered under the National Relation Board. We were not covered under the minimum wage. Farm workers, they had no protection at all. And this is the thing that César Chávez taught us how to do, how to get it. And by uniting together and refusing to do some work, we was asking to be recognized, not under the union, under the National Farm Workers Association. That was the name of the organization. And
Marcos,
out of that,
Marcos, this is Chris. Where are you living right now?
Chicago.
Chicago,
Chicago?
yeah,
And who is that with you?
this is my wife now,
Andrea.
Who?
Andrea.
is my wife. It's named Andrea.
Andrea,
Uh-huh.
I know that lady.
You know her in Boston.
Yes,
When you went up there and you went also for the signs
Human billboard.
and the billboard, remember?
I remember.
Okay. So that's
I'm
Andrea.
this
Give me the picture from this side.
innocent young minister
Hold on.
arriving in Boston.
I'm going to
The
show
first
you
thing
guys.
Marcos does is hand me a boycott sign to carry through the airport. He was probably testing me to see if I had any guts. But anyway, that was our first meeting.
I'm going to show you a picture. Can you guys see it?
You hold it back a little bit. There you go.
You see it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. That picture is my wife and is my daughter.
And what's your daughter's name, Marcos?
My daughter is Maria Munoz.
Well,
And Andrea,
what else is happening?
Andrea is Munoz.
I'm happy to talk to you and see you again. It's been a long time.
It is a long time.
Okay.
But this, at the beginning that I was talking to you, this is how Marcos Munoz got involved with César Chávez and the organization. To me, it was my greatest teacher, and to know who I am. Because before, you don't know who you are. And César always said, we will continue to be like this till we get an education. When we get an education, I want you to understand that that's the freedom of the farm workers. With an education, you could go anywhere. You could do anything. And those that we couldn't read and write, we begin to understand it. I still not read and write,
But your daughter does.
but I got a daughter. Is educated, and thanks to the farm worker struggle. Thanks to those people throughout the country that stopped eating grapes. Who would have think that by not eating grapes, you could bring so many memories, so many solutions, so many hopes, so many education throughout the country, It's under the umbrella of César Chávez.
Okay.
So thank you very much for.
I would like to add to that, the person that's missing from this panel is Gilbert Pavia. And he was the one that really got me involved with the farm workers in 1965 when the strike started. And he was the person that throughout this effort in Borrego Springs actually led the work that we were doing, that I was doing, Marcos, and we had two other organizers that were there supporting the work that Marco was doing, but also under the direction of Gilbert Pavia. And Gilbert and I have stayed friends ever since then, ever since 1965, when he had gone to Los Angeles to attempt to stop the sale of grapes in the Central Market and in other places. And we started the boycott there that Marcos was talking about. But the legacy that he left for his child was the same sort of legacy that was left for my children. I have 6. 4 of them are union members and union leaders. My oldest daughter actually leads the support work at California State University at Northbridge, and she's a member of the union there. And then I have 2 daughters that teach in Southern California, and both of them are active in the teachers union there. My youngest son is in Houston, Texas, where he's a recording secretary of the union where he works. And I have two other sons that are actually working on their own in Baltimore and in Nashville, Tennessee. But all of them, I think, learned from the work in the union. I did not come out of an academic background. I came out of a workplace. So, you know, the legacy of César Chávez, but most importantly for my family was the direction and the work of Gilbert Padilla over the years. And even to this day, with the work that we're doing here in Mississippi with immigrants, he provides me with advice and support for the work we're doing here. And I really, and I think Marcos, all of us really appreciate the work that Gilbert did. And we're sorry that he was not able to participate in this. He's 93 years old, and like Marcos turns 80 next month. I just turned 80 2 weeks ago. So you can see how old we all are. And Chris probably is around the same age, if not older. So all of our lives we put into this kind of work. And that was the influence of the NFWA, among others. And when I left the United Farm Workers, I began organizing workers in the South, public workers and healthcare workers and hospitality workers into various unions before we started the Mississippi Immigrant Rights Alliance 20 years ago. And we're continuing to work. I'm still working full time. My wife is the legal director here. Her name is Patricia Ice. And we have a staff and we're organizing in Mississippi, organizing immigrants, not just Latino immigrants, but we have many here from Yemen and various other countries from Africa. We have worked with people from over 70 countries here in Mississippi. So the immigrant community here, like in California and other places, is growing and is becoming an important part of our political and social life in the state, as has happened decades ago in California and Texas and other places.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you, Marcos, for your dedication to all of this and what you do throughout your lives, and your legacy is definitely gonna live on and has impacted thousands of people beyond yourselves. And I want to make sure we give Reverend Chris Hartmeyer some time to respond as well. Do you have anything to add, Chris?
Is that a question?
I just wanted to make sure you had some time to add your thoughts as well. If you'd like to share some of your thoughts about your work over this time and the significance of Borrego Springs and your experience there.
At the time of the Borrego Springs arrests, I was the director of a church organization called the California Migrant Ministry. And it was like a ecumenical ministry to farm workers. And sort of like by an accident of history, we were the first and only outside organization to get to be in Delano and support the grape strike. And then many of our staff ended up being part of the farm workers movement. So it was just kind of like we just happened to be there at that time, and Cesar was looking for and willing to encourage other people to come and help. And we were among the first to do that in the California Migrant Ministry. And Jim Drake, I don't know if he was, I thought I heard his name, but anyway, Jim Drake was our staff person, and he worked in Delano with Cesar full time and then elsewhere as well. And for those of you who don't know, Jim died probably 10 years ago now from lung cancer. Just from smoking a pipe. Anyway. So Borrego was like one of those events in the farm workers movement that drew more people in and got more attention and helped to develop the movement and the support for the movement. And eventually the table grape boycott became a international phenomenon. And in a few years brought the growers to the bargaining table in 1970. So the farm workers did the basic organizing work in the fields and in the cities, and many, many thousands of people supported them or invited to support them and did support them. And it together, we made a difference. Without Cesar and the farm workers and Marcos, we would have been irrelevant. But with them leading the way, we could support and be of some value. You must be in Borrego right now.
I am. Yep, I am here in Borrego Springs. I'm in Anza-Borrego Desert State Park. I'm at our headquarters here, right outside. We have actually just beyond me back here, we have the Borrego Palm Canyon Campground, which is where many of you stayed. As Marcos was saying, you're run, by the state of California. So the city police didn't have any jurisdiction over this area. So this is where many of the boycotters and strikers stayed and organizers stayed because state parks are for everyone. And so that's an important kind of stamp in our history in correlation with you all. But I'm wondering, how did you all find out about Borrego Springs? Because it seems like you all came from different places. What brought you all to Borrego Springs? How did that happen?
Well, for me, I was with Gilbert in Los Angeles, and we were working on the boycott. And I guess César contacted him about coming here. And so initially, he sent Gilbert sent Marcos to start signing up people. And then shortly after that, Gilbert, myself, and others came to join Marcos in early May, and we stayed working with the workers until almost, until the time that Chris and Cesar and Paula Salandini and I think 10 other workers were arrested. And that was in the midst of the strike, and the season ended. And so we went on, back to, Los Angeles, and then to Delano and further north into Marysville. And we had pretty much had the same crew or same team of organizers that went through that. And then we had the election in DeGiorgio and Delano, which was a very heated campaign, but we won that there in Delano, as well as Borrego Springs and in Marysville.
When I think of you, I think of Texas.
Yes, I didn't mention Texas,
right?
but
Pardon?
yeah, after the campaigns in DeGiorgio, I left for Texas and was involved in the strike that we had there. And that went on for about a year. And Gilbert also was there. And we tried to win it, but the significant part of it is that we had a lawsuit against the Texas anti-labor laws that prohibited picketing when you had a strike of people standing closer than 50 feet apart. And so a large number of us, including myself, were arrested for standing closer than 50 feet. And we also had one of your colleagues, Reverend Ed Kruger, who I visited about 10 years ago. And he was part of it, and he was from the migrant ministry.
Is Ed still alive?
The last time I heard from him, yes, Ed is still alive. He lives in Edinburgh, and he was working across the border in Reynosa until recently, doing Know Your Rights house meetings with people there. Know Your Rights with Mexican labor laws, which at least on paper are better than what we have here. And Ed was wonderful, but we got arrested and we had a lawsuit that was filed against the Rangers. And basically they had been a personal army for the governor of Texas, who at that time was John Connolly. And so we sued them and forced them to become part of the Department of Public Safety and also hire people of color to become Texas Ranger officers. And so it's a very different agency, although I question whether they're not as brutal as before. But also the anti-labor law was declared unconstitutional. We went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court at that time ruled that it was unconstitutional. So you don't have the anti-picketing laws anymore. But as a result of that, it became a catalyst for the whole Chicano movement in Texas and led to many other things, including, the effort with immigrants and so on that are going on there. One of the leaders of the immigrant movement there is Eddie Canales. He's also president of the board of the National Network for Immigrant Refugee Rights, and he was also a boycotter back in the 60s and 70s, along with other people like the late Maria Jimenez, who passed away recently. We had a lot of activists in Texas as a result of that strike. And, the rest is history, and there's too much to go into, so I won't talk about that history, but it had a significant effect. Ralph Yarborough was involved. He was a senator at that time, and others. So from Texas, I went to South Carolina. Well, I went to Georgia and then Alabama and South Carolina, and we were organizing healthcare workers. And then back to Texas with Eliseo Medina, who you probably remember, organizing state employees in Texas that was very successful. And that led me to Mississippi, where we had a successful campaign here with the state employees in Mississippi, which also helped trigger the organizing of the casinos here, which led to the Mississippi Immigrant Rights Alliance. So.
Well, I think, Borrego Springs, we never, myself,
I
I
don't
live.
know how long we're supposed to be on, but I have to stop.
And
I'd like to say goodbye to Marcos and Andrea and Bill. Bill,
Yeah.
who looks so distinguished in comparison to when I first met him. And anyway, and you folks from the Park Service, thank you.
Of course.
And Mrs. Biden is supposed to be in Keene today or sometime, maybe today.
Yes. So Chris, we want to thank you. I know you have to jump off this a little bit early, and I'll let everybody say some last remarks as well. I do want to point out before you leave that we are streaming this live on our Facebook, and there are a lot of people that are thanking you all for sharing these, inspirational stories and sharing your part of your history with us, including Frank Padilla, who is Gilbert's nephew, who works here with our district and with Anza-Borrego pretty closely, who said he's on the phone with him right now. And Gilbert wants to send all of his, best regards to all of you chatting with us today.
Who is sending us her regards?
Gilbert Padilla.
Oh, Gilbert.
Yes. So we've seen that he's here. So I want to thank you, Chris, for sharing your part of your story with us today. And if Marcos and Bill, if you have any last things you want to share with us, I'd be happy to hear from you.
I was just giving you the last thought. Borrego Springs to us was just a little town. Matter of fact, I remember correct. There was a gas station and a little store. And I used to buy my bologna and my potato chips there. That was, now I can't measure how big Borrego Springs is now.
It's not too big.
Eh?
She said it's not too big.
Marcos, it's a joy to see you. For me,
Thank you.
a true joy.
Yes.
He said it's a joy to see you. Say goodbye to him.
Yo también, gusto de verte.
Now go.
Joy to see you. And thank you very much. And I'm glad to see you again. And I love you.
Take care, Mississippi.
Okay.
Yeah, it was great seeing you again, Chris. I haven't seen either you or Marcos in about 50 years. So,
I don't know.
yeah, it's a great
But I'm not
reunion. But I think one of the things with Borrego, it's something I've always thought about because it was my first union campaign that I began at the beginning. I went all the way through to the election, which we won, working on that campaign. And again, I learned a lot. And really, we learned a lot from each other during that period. And I think that was part of the joy of working together with the farm workers movement, because I learned very early, in fact, where I worked before, that the best information about workers comes from workers themselves. And I've always remembered that in all the other organizing campaigns that I've been involved with, I learned from the workers. And Borrego taught me that very early on. And I think that is a legacy that meant a lot to me and everything that went on. And Chris was wonderful. Marcos, of course, was very, very energetic. We were all very energetic in those days, but it made a difference, obviously, in not only the legacy of that with all of us, but also with all of the workers that have been affected by the work of the unions. I'll say that plural, throughout the California, Texas, the South, and the rest of the country.
Well, I was a lot younger, Bill.
Yeah, we have also the president of our organization is an organizer with the FLCL, and he's currently working on the Amazon campaign in Alabama and other parts of the South where workers are organizing, and they have
Good luck with that.
They have they ended their voting day before yesterday, and they're in the process of counting the ballots now. So we just keep on doing it.
Go ahead.
Well,
Go ahead.
Well, goodbye, all.
What to say?
Thanks.
And thanks to the Parks Department in California in putting this together. It's something that needed to be recognized for decades. And finally, I think this campaign and the workers in Borrego and the people who work with them are getting recognition.
Has anybody remembered where the trial took place?
I
For
think,
the
was
vicious
it Julian
trespassers?
or Chris?
Anyway, it's in a book somewhere. I'll find it.
It's
Yeah,
in San Diego
Is
County.
it Julian? But I'm not sure.
Maybe Julian. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you all. Marcos, do you have any last things you want to add?
No, I just want to give you guys thank you for reminding us what I think we're talking about over 50 years.
50. Go ahead.
Over 50 years, you know. And over 50 years we've seen people like you say, you're a young woman. And the student is a young person. And that's so beautiful. Seeing people, seeing history. And I'm so proud of you guys, you know. And in many ways, I look at you as a young person. You look at my daughter as a young person. You know. How much the difference really differs. The thing differs now, you know. And
Marcos could have been the mayor of Boston if he had tried. And he may be the governor of Massachusetts. I don't know. But anyway,
Governor
there
of
wasn't anybody in the Boston area at that time who didn't know who Marcos Munoz was.
That's
He
incredible.
was a charming rascal and a great organizer.
so
Oh.
anyway, what I read, I look at the picture you have here. It's so beautiful. The mountain, the woods, pretty hot area.
Yes, this is today behind me right here. I went out and I took this photo. I'm not really sitting outside, but I took this photo this morning right before we started so we could get a real time photo of what this looks like here today in Borrego Springs. So I want to thank you all so much again for joining us today. I really appreciate you all taking the time to come and share your stories and share this part of history today on César Chávez Day as we dedicate our virtual interpretive or our interpretive panels virtually here. Those panels are located in the Borrego Palm Canyon Campground right near the Borrego Palm Canyon Trail, which is where many of you stayed when you were here in 1966. So thank you all so much for joining us today. Thank you everybody who is joining us online. We are going to post a video shortly from our high school students. They created a little virtual tour of different places in our community that were important to these historical events. So thank you all again so much for being here today. And thank you everybody for joining us online.
Bye-bye.